Hello, everyone, and welcome to Penn Faulkner's first literary conversation of the season, Literature on Screen, Shadow and Bone. My name is Shahenda Helmi. I'm the Director of Literary Programs at Penn Faulkner, and I'm so excited to welcome you all here with us tonight. For those of you joining us for the first time, first of all, welcome. And the Penn Faulkner Foundation is a literary nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C., and our mission is to celebrate literature and foster connections between readers and writers to enrich and inspire both individuals and communities. We fulfill our mission by administering 2 annual National Literary Awards, the Penn Faulkner Award for Fiction and the Penn Malamud Award for Excellence in the Short Story, as well as through our many education programs which bring free books and author visits into DC public and public charter schools. And of course, we can't forget about our Literary Conversation series, which begins its new virtual season tonight. Thank you all so much for being here. If you'd like to learn more about what the Penn Faulkner Foundation does, please visit our website at pennfaulkner.org. Before I hand things over to Petra and Leigh tonight, I do just want to mention a couple of quick notes about tonight's webinar. There will be live captions provided this evening and at all Penn Faulkner literary conversations as a part of our commitment to accessibility. If you'd like to turn your captions on or off, you can do so using the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. There will also be a brief Q&A session at the end of the event, so please submit your questions using the Q&A panel that can also be found at the bottom of your screen. You can also upvote your favorite questions, and we'll make sure to get to as many as we can in the time that we have. Finally, as this is a Literature on Screen event, we will be playing a few clips from the fantastic adaptation of Shadow and Bone on Netflix. As I'm sure we're all aware by now, virtual platforms are not without their limitations. So there may be a slight lag in the video as we're broadcasting to so many of you all over the world tonight. So please bear with us as we work through the confines of this platform. All right, it's time to get this conversation started. I am very honored to introduce tonight's fantastic panelists who've so graciously taken the time to be with us tonight. Leigh Bardugo is the New York Times bestselling author of Ninth House and the creator of the Grishaverse, which spans the Shadow and Bone trilogy, the Six of Crows duology, the King of Scars duology, the Language of Thorns, and the Lives of Saints, with more to come, which is great news for us Grishaverse fans. Her short stories can be found in multiple anthologies, including Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy. You can find all of Leigh's books available for sale by our bookstore partners, Politics and Prose, and we'll go ahead and put the links up in the chat shortly so you can purchase those books tonight if you'd like to do so. Finally, Leigh grew up in Southern California and graduated from Yale University. These days, she lives and writes and is joining us from Los Angeles. We're also very honored to have Petra Mayer facilitating tonight's conversation. Petra is an editor and self-proclaimed resident nerd at NPR Books, focusing on fiction and particularly genre fiction. You can also hear her on the air and on the occasional episode of Pop Culture Happy Hour. Previously, Petra was an associate producer and director for All Things Considered on the weekends, where she handled all of the show's books coverage. Petra received her master's degree in journalism from Columbia University and currently lives in Washington, D.C. All right, that is it from me. Thank you all again for being a part of tonight's evening. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Leigh Bardugo and Petra Mayer.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here tonight. Hi, Leigh.
Hi, Petra.
I haven't seen you in forever. We sit next to each other at the publishing lunch.
We have a tradition where we sit next to each other every year in New York and eat a small salad and and a large piece of chicken.
So, yes, what are we going to do now that Book Expo isn't happening anymore?
I don't know. We're going to have to find some other place to go to lunch that isn't Javits, and I think that might be wonderful.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
So thanks, Shahenda, for that wonderful introduction. You've kind of said it all. So let's kick things off. Thanks, everybody, also in the audience for being here tonight. I know there's a ton of you. The questions are already flooding in, which is very exciting. So I know that you wanted to start with a reading.
Oh, well, wanted to is sort of extreme. They asked me to do a reading. I actually get super nervous whenever I read, so fingers crossed. They asked me to select a scene, so I thought it would be fun to select something that actually translated pretty cleanly from the book to the show. So this is when Alina is brought to the Darkling after she saves the sand skiff. The Darkling rose from his chair. He gestured and the soldiers stepped back, leaving me alone to face him. The tent seemed eerily quiet. Slowly, he descended the steps. I had to fight the urge to back away as he came to a halt in front of me. Now, what do you say, Alina Starkov? He asked pleasantly. I swallowed. My throat was dry and my heart was careening from beat to beat, but I knew I had to speak. I had to make him understand that I'd had no part in any of this. There's been some kind of mistake, I said hoarsely. I didn't do anything. I don't know how we survived. The Darkling appeared to consider this. Then he crossed his arms, cocked his head to one side. Well, he said, his voice bemused, I like to think that I know everything that happens in Ravka, and that if I had a sun summoner living in my own country, I'd be aware of it. Soft murmurs of assent rose from the crowd, but he ignored them, watching me closely. But something powerful stopped the Volcra and saved the king's skiffs. He paused and waited as if he expected me to solve this conundrum for him. My chin rose stubbornly. I didn't do anything, I said, not one thing. The side of the Darkling's mouth twitched as if he were repressing a smile. He slid his eyes over me from head to toe and back again. I felt like something strange and shiny, a curiosity that had washed up on a lakeshore that he might kick aside with his boot. Is your memory as faulty as your friend's? He asked and bobbed his head toward Mal. I faltered. What did I remember? Terror, darkness, pain, Mal's blood, his life flowing out of him beneath my hands, the rage that filled me at the thought of my own helplessness. Hold out your arm, said the Darkling. What? We've wasted enough time. Hold out your arm. A cold spike of fear went through me. I looked around in panic, but there was no help to be had. The soldiers stared forward, stone-faced. The survivors from the skiff looked frightened and tired. The Grisha regarded me curiously. The girl in blue was smirking. Mal's pale face seemed to have gone even whiter, but there was no answer in his worried eyes. Shaking, I held out my left arm. Push up your sleeve. I didn't do anything. I'd meant to say it loudly, to proclaim it, but my voice sounded frightened and small. The Darkling looked at me, waiting. I pushed up my sleeve. He spread his arms and terror washed through me as I saw his palms filling with something black that pooled and curled through the air like ink in water. Now, he said, in that same soft conversational voice, as if we were sitting together drinking tea, as if I did not stand before him shaking. Let's see what you can do. He brought his hands together and there was a sound like a thunderclap. I gasped as undulating darkness spread from his clasped hands, spilling in a black wave over the crowd. I was blind. The room was gone. Everything was gone. I cried out in fear as I felt the Darkling's fingers close around my bare wrist. Suddenly, my fear receded. It was still there, cringing like an animal inside me, but it had been pushed aside by something calm and sure and powerful, something vaguely familiar. I felt a call ring through me and, to my surprise, I felt something in me rise up to answer. I pushed it away, pushed it down. Somehow I knew if that thing got free, it would destroy me. Nothing there, the Darkling murmured. I felt how very close he was to me in the dark. My panicked mind seized on his words. Nothing there, that's right, nothing at all. Now leave me be. To my relief, that struggling thing inside me seemed to lie back down, leaving the Darkling's call unanswered. Not so fast, he whispered. I felt something cold press against the inside skin of my forearm. In the same moment that I realized it was a knife, the blade cut into my skin. Pain and fear rushed through me. I cried out. The thing inside me roared to the surface, speeding toward the Darkling's call. I couldn't stop myself. I answered. The world exploded into blazing white light. The darkness shattered around us like glass. For a moment, I saw the faces of the crowd, their mouths wide with shock as the tent filled with shining sunlight, the air shimmering with heat. Then the Darkling released his grip, and with his touch went that peculiar sense of certainty that had possessed me. The radiant light disappeared, leaving ordinary candlelight in its place, but I could still feel the warm and inexplicable glow of sunshine on my skin. My legs gave way, and the Darkling caught me up against his body with one arm. I guess you only look like a mouse, he whispered.
So exciting. That was a really good dramatic reading, I have to say. And
stressful. It doesn't help that our audiobook reader, Lauren, is so fantastic. So every time I have to read, I'm like, why don't we just play a recording? Because she's really, really good.
But it's different hearing the person who actually wrote the words speaking them. I think so anyways. I mean, I can't deal with audiobooks. I read too fast. So like if it's actually the author reading the work, then I'm like, oh, I'll stop and listen to this.
I will keep that in mind.
Yeah. But through the magic of technology, we can actually see that scene. Shahenda, you have the video clip queued up, right?
I think I'm alone here.
I'm here in spirit. I'll just be a disembodied voice.
Function.
Oh, I can start my video now. Hang on 1 second. Hello, technology.
Okay.
Here I am. All right. Well, so weirdly, the one thing that I had forgotten in all of my neurotic over preparation for this is that it's written, the book is in first person. You're hearing Alina's monologue, and the show is certainly not.
No.
Which is just, it just sort of pops into three dimensions. You know, Mal is in a completely different place in that scene. He's not in the tent actually watching her.
So fun fact that the scene was originally shot with Mal in it.
Oh.
And then we made some choices after in terms of the way he was wounded and how he needed to approach the coach after. So we ended up shooting his part of that much later. So that was actually a shift in the script that I think worked really beautifully. And I think it's one of the great things about getting to do a show with multiple perspectives, and what is fundamentally an ensemble cast is that you aren't locked into one character's head the whole time. So we were able to introduce a lot more texture in the world than we would have had otherwise.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've read interviews with you where you've sort of talked about how you were involved with the writing process. Actually, wait a minute. No, I'm getting ahead of myself, because what I really want to do is go back and ask, you said there were some choices made about like Mal's presence in that scene. So can you dig into that a little deeper? Like, what was the thought process between?
It was really, honestly, it's not that sexy. It was really about the logistics of like where he was supposed to be in the camp. There was a smaller scene with a healer that fans of the book will recognize, that got pulled out, and just it was really a pacing thing more than anything else. But I can tell you, when I first saw that ring, I was like, and Eric was really nervous about it. He was like, okay, I know there's no ring. I was like, I'm in. I'm all here for an excellent accessory. So I am very much here for that.
Show us your, you got some rings there. Yeah.
Yeah, this is actually sparse for me. So, and I don't have a special, like, I will cut you Darkling ring, but I thought it was a great addition. I thought it was super visceral and sexy and much more interesting than just a knife. And it brought me back to writing that scene and considering that moment, you know, deciding to write the beat where she's able to push her power back down without really even knowing what it is. And then deciding on sort of the mechanism by which he was going to pull it out of her.
I also love the choice of that he has it's a ring, it's a tool, like that says something about his character and what he does all day, that like this is something that he has ready to hand, you know? Like it's not just an anonymous.
You're going to be a ruler and are constantly under risk of death, then you need to be prepared. I feel like you know, he's the kind of guy where everything in his house could probably kill you. You know, everything has like a secret use. Everything.
So he lives in Australia, is what you're saying?
Pretty much. Pretty much. The lamp is poison. The table is poison.
I have two questions, but before I get ahead of myself again, you mentioned Eric, and for people who might not know who that is, can you just give us the rundown?
That is Eric Heiserer. He is our showrunner on Shadow and Bone, season 1, and in season 2, he'll be co-showrunning with Dagan Frickland, who is one of the wonderful writers from season 1. And yeah, he's the person who really pushed to bring these two stories together. And I'll admit it was an easy sell for me, but without him, it probably would not have happened.
So you say it was an easy sell. So it was the thing that where you were like, okay, him.
You know, Eric had tweeted me long ago when he was reading Six of Crows. I'm fairly sure that the picture he tweeted, he was on his way to the Academy Awards. I mean, that's quite a flex. You're like, oh,
Yeah,
I'm reading your
seriously.
book in my
All right.
tuxedo.
Go on, you bad self.
And I at home eating my chicken nuggets was like, wow. No, I was really like, all like my friends and I were like, wow, he's reading it, and he just had adapted Arrival, but I didn't really have any expectation for where that might go. But when we sold the option to Netflix, he was one of the first names we brought up. I said, this guy is a fan, kind of a big deal. Let's see if he might be interested. And he and I met before he ever really went in to speak to Netflix and pitch to Netflix, and to sort of see if we were on the same page. And my gut said that this was going to work, and we had very similar ideas for what we wanted to change, what we wanted to do with the stories, and that was it made me feel pretty confident moving forward with him.
Yeah, I know a lot of people have asked you what it was like to see these characters come to life, but I'm kind of more interested in like what it was like to let them go. I mean, they were yours, right? I mean, once you let a book out into the world, it's not really yours anymore because people will have their own interpretations and everybody have their own headcanon, but like, it's been a whole thing.
There was a certain sense of grief about knowing that the alchemy that happens in a reader's head that allows them to pull your description from the book and make that character into whomever they want to live in their head was going to be defeated by this. So many more people see a Netflix show than will ever read the books, and those that pick up the books because of the Netflix show will forever have those characters in their heads. And quite candidly, I think it's invariable that all of us will have whatever headcanon we had is replaced by these actors. And so there was a certain concern in me about that. It felt almost like a narrowing. And then when I saw them on screen together, that fear really evaporated because I got this opportunity to see the characters interact together. And there were surprises for me, whether it was a gesture or a hand on the shoulder or a shared glance that to me was extraordinarily powerful to suddenly see these things that aren't on the page, that are implied, actually come into being in a way that was, a surprise to me. So I hope that readers felt the same way.
I mean, I'm gonna get into this later, but like, I don't think I've ever watched a show and had it match my headcanon as closely as this show did when I saw the Prose and went, that could not be any more cousin Inej and Jesper. Like, wow.
Something that was our kind of motto was you cast for the show, you don't cast for the poster. So there were times when, like, I remember when Amita's tape came in and I was like, she looked exactly as I'd pictured Inej. And I was like, oh God, please don't be terrible, because you just never know until and then she was spectacular. But you don't know in that moment. You really have to talk yourself out of like this kind of vision that you may have been carrying around with you, because in the same way that in adaptation, the particulars are not necessarily important. The heart of the character, the spirit of the character, the spirit of the story is essential. That's true for casting the character as well.
And you got to see most of the all of the audition tapes? How involved?
Oh God, no. I would have lost my mind very quickly. They would call down, and that's actually what the process is like. Even for most of the producers involved, the casting director will call down from the auditions that they have, and so you have to really have a sense of trust with that person. And then they will send, batches of auditions every day, and you watch the same scene again and again and again and again. And I will tell you, what we do now is we take the sides, like the scenes for actors to read in audition, we take them from the book instead of the actual scripts for the show, just in case anything leaks.
Oh, that's really interesting. Because it's so different. Like writing on a page and writing for the ear and writing for the eye are so different. Like this is something I run into professionally because I deal with writers who write for web and for the radio, and it's almost like a different language. So like, I mean, I guess a skilled actor can read from a book and make it seem like.
Oh, we don't just we take the dialogue out.
Okay.
and we mush it around, and you know, Dagan or Eric or one of the writers will make it, you know, give more shape to the scene. Or if we need something that has both banter and a sense of gravitas, then we'll put things together. We don't just offer them the book and we're like, here's your first test.
That was kind of a cool mental image.
I know, right?
So going back to the idea of headcanon though, like and the writers, that's sort of all the stuff we've been talking about. Not many people have the opportunity to try to bring their headcanon to life, I guess. So what I wanted to ask about was just the process, like how involved were you with setting up the writer's room, with being involved with them during the writing of the episodes? Were you
My role was essentially, I was very active at the beginning of the process. So, you know, talking with Eric about the initial pilot, and then when we had assembled the writer's room, which largely was left to Eric, like we were able to see who he was considering and talk about that, but that I did not. He was the one who was going to be captaining that crew. So, and then I got to go into the writer's room pretty much every week or every other week, and they would pitch me the episodes. They would sort of do their, you know, walk me through the outline. And if I was concerned about something, we would talk it through. If they had a question, they usually had a big list of questions for me at the end, some of which I could answer, sometimes I couldn't. If I was particularly excited about something, I could let them know, like, wow, I love this move you're making. So for me, like that was sort of the most fundamental part of it. And then seeing the scripts come through, giving notes, making suggestions. You know, as a writer, I hate it when people give me suggestions. I'm like, just tell me what the problem is and I'll figure out how to fix it. But I am that jackass who's like, let me do it. And then they're like, we don't want it. But that was a big part of the process. As we moved into other things, I was more removed. I was in the middle of writing a book, and I had to sort of step back more and more. And this has been a little bit different. With season 2, I've been able to be a little bit more involved in casting, costumes, production design, meeting with directors. But then I think I am going to step back. I'm not going to be as involved in reading the scripts. I think at this point, you know, we are going to be diverging quite a bit more. That's all I can say. And really cannot say more than that. I'm about to be descended upon by Netflix assassins. But for me, there has to be a moment of saying this doesn't belong to me anymore. You know, the books are mine. They will always be on the shelves. And this has its own life now.
I have a whole bunch of questions about season 2, and I'm trying not to be spoilery because I don't want the Netflix assassins to come down on you. That would be terrifying. But are we gonna get some Sturmhond? Please? No? Too spoilery? Okay, well, I'm thinking about it. I'm sending you brain waves.
I mean, look, Netflix was like, don't say anything about it, but I'd already sent a newsletter out to 80,000 people. So yeah, good chance you're going to see Sturmhond.
Good. I'm excited.
Yeah.
And I have so many questions here that I prepared that were, so I feel like I need to kind of, no more fun, let's talk about serious things.
Okay.
No, actually. I do want to go back to the crows though, because we have a clip queued up, and Shahenda, would you be so good as to play the clip of the crows that we have? Okay, I will turn my video and audio up. I got to rewatch this to prepare for this event, and it made me really happy because I love the crows. So, but they, as people know, they are not actually in Shadow and Bone. So I wanted to ask about sort of the process. Whose idea was it to fold them in, and how did you go about constructing a story for them? Because I think the first Crows book takes place roughly after Shadow and Bone.
It takes place 2 years after the end of Ruin and Rising. And so that first day when Eric and I sat down together in a little Italian bistro, and I tried to pretend to play it cool, he was like, okay, so listen, hear me out. I have this wild pitch for you. I want to mush these stories together. And I think he was prepared to be like, I have prepared a PowerPoint. And I was like, great, that sounds amazing. He was like, I'll put the PowerPoint away. But I really wanted to get to make, I wanted the Grishaverse to be what it ended up being. Okay. Shadow and Bone is first person. It's very much a chosen one story. It's very white, it's very straight. And though that changes throughout the trilogy, I wanted us to see the Grishaverse in all its glory, for better or worse. And that for me was sort of the driving purpose of this. I felt it was really important to see the Prose story side by side with Alina, to see the story of the Expendables, the people nobody cares about, right next to the Chosen One, because they have more in common than you sort of initially think. And for me too, the real problem was, and I said this to him early on, you cannot Frankenstein these plots. All right, you cannot put Jurda Parem and the Darkling in the same room, because it all blows up. Like the all of your plot gets eaten right away. There's just too much power in one place. So I said, you can Frankenstein these characters, but you're going to end up having to write prequel Heist. And I feel your pain, because writing Heist is incredibly challenging, although it gets easier the more you do it. But they were up to the task, and that's really what they set out to do, and also to excavate parts of the Crow's backstories, but to make sure that we had plenty of runway ahead of us if we got a second season and beyond. So that was kind of the challenge of bringing those stories together. And I know there was a lot of anxiety among readers that this is crazy, it won't work, it doesn't, but I felt so confident in our writers that I was like, give us a chance, guys. I swear to you, this is gonna work. I swear it's gonna make sense. And also, it's very hard to start a series one place and then to suddenly introduce all of these characters later in, which again presumes that we'll get more seasons, but we wanted to sort of hedge our bets early on about being able to expand.
Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, it makes lots of sense. Like, obviously,
but at the time, they thought we were nuts. They were all like, no, it can't be done.
I thought it was incredibly skillfully done, because the problem just structurally is that, like, you meet the Crows years later, you know where they're at, so you know whatever they were trying to do. I'm assuming that all of the 1,000 people who are on this Zoom call with us have read all the books. Okay, I'm just gonna say that. So you've all read the Crow's books, so you know that whatever they were trying to do in the show, they didn't end up being able to do. But it was still suspenseful. The scenes of them, crossing the fold, it was just,
for me, that was really thrilling to see the way that those stories intersect, and the way the writers brought them together was really fantastic, and I think really joyful. And I made this offhand comment in an event like months before the show came out, maybe years, where I was like, it's going to be the most elaborate, expensive fan fiction ever, and everyone got really mad. Like, really, like, this is going to be a disaster, this is going to be terrible, which to me is like, why are you so mad about fan fiction? It's amazing, first of all. And second, like all adaptation is fan fiction. That's what it is. All adaptation is fan fiction. And so to me, this is the way adaptation should work, where you keep the core, you keep the heart, but you're allowed to play. And otherwise, I don't think, you cannot ask, I think, a group of smart writers, talented directors, amazing actors to simply transcribe. I don't think that's exciting for anyone.
No, absolutely not. And I think you already said this, but I just wanted to reiterate that, like, having them there, the people who aren't part of the Chosen One storyline, they show you another side of Ravka, of the whole world, that you don't really see in the first book, which I really love.
Yes, and you have, I think, a much greater sense of the way these nations interact, the richness of Perch, how impoverished Ravka is. These kind of global politics get to play a role much earlier on, because you have these different perspectives. And I think also, like, it's almost like a game that they're playing. Like, for people who are new, I actually feel bad for people who are new to the books from the show, because then they're going to be like, where are these characters? Where's my plot? But there's this fun thing that happens in the Winter Fate, where the Winter Fate basically goes off the way it does in the books, essentially, except the Crows are there. And I love that kind of retcon. I love the idea that somebody was there all along and we just didn't know it. Is that the case? No. But in the show, we can get to see this alternate timeline, which I found very thrilling.
And it totally, I mean, that really is a fan fiction trope too. I mean, do I read a lot of fan fiction? I sure do.
It's a comic book trope too. It's a comics trope, right? Like, I love that. Like, that kind of retcon to me is the very best.
I want to go back to something you said about sort of how the first book is 10 years old at this point. I mean, and you have changed and grown as the writer. You yourself, out of your own mouth, came the words very white, very straight. And these are things that definitely the show tries to address. Just anecdotally, a dear friend of mine was watching the first episode with me, and he said, "Is this whole show going to be this straight?" And I was like, "No, wait till you meet Jesper." And so he agreed to keep watching it with me. But one of the choices, the changes between the page and the screen that has been talked about a whole lot is the choice to make Alina a half Shu. And I wanted to ask about that. I was talking to a very, very smart, thoughtful colleague of mine who's Asian American. And what she said was, what they said was that they wanted to see more, that it was a first step to make Alina half Shu, but they wanted to see her kind of think about it in the context of, outside of the context of people just being racist at her because she's Shu. They wanted to know more about the culture of Shu and why the enmity between the two countries, is it more than just the war? And that it would be explored more than just like poster, here's a Shu face, and this is your enemy. Right. And given that I know the Shu culture gets explored much more in the last book, King of Scars, tell me what's happening with that going forward and what choices you might be making.
I mean, I guess what I would say is, I don't think that's an unreasonable critique. And I think that, I think I actually heard a conversation with you guys on NPR about this.
Yeah, you heard what I was talking about then. You heard my dear colleague Mallory, who's incredibly smart.
I think in terms of war, like, war is fortune and glory. Like, this is a funny thing that like a lot of executives love to be like, why are they at war? And I'm like, because war. Like, that is the shit. That is human history, is because war. And because this is what happens on borders, they shift and are fought over. However, I think we missed some opportunities, particularly, like, for instance, with Botkin, where she's encountering another Shu person, particularly in a military environment. But that is something that we have very deeply developed in season 2. This was something that was important to us. It was important to our writers. Christina Strain basically came onto the show, like, who I was a huge fan of before, and had actually, we've known about each other's careers for basically for 10 years. Like, at one of my first conferences, I went and camped out at her booth so I could meet her. So, but she came onto the show because she wanted the opportunity, because she's half Korean, and she wanted the opportunity to write a half Asian lead. And so that not just Alina's relationship to Shu culture, but her relationship to Ravka and what it means to be both of those things and neither of those things, is something that comes up quite a bit in the second season.
I'm totally going to tell Mallory that I asked you that, and that's what you said. And also, having known, sorry, you dropped out.
Better by them, I don't think every show is for everybody, but I also think we can always try to get it right. You do your best, you fuck up sometimes, and then you try to do better.
I mean, that's all you can do. And having established that, now if I had known you were going to hear that episode of Pop Culture Happy Hour, I wouldn't have been so rude about what I thought of the Darklings backstory.
I don't mind that, though. Look, man, I've been in this game for a while. I don't, everything I do doesn't have to be loved by everybody. When I was writing Ninth House, I remember thinking, this book is for 3 people, and I was lucky enough to find an editor who was like, let's do it anyway, so that's not what creating fiction or writing fiction is about. That's not what about creating anything is about. It's about doing the thing you think is best for the story, and then hoping people come along for the ride.
Absolutely. I still wish he'd just been evil. But I do want to ask, actually.
Evil. I don't do just evil. It's boring.
I say just evil. well, never mind. We're not here for my literary critiques. But I did want to actually ask, there is all kinds of stuff that, I feel like having watched the show that there was just more room for you to stretch out and to add some things, because the bit of the humanizing bit of the Darklings backstory that I think I rudely compared to Magneto comes from a short story, right? That a lot of people, if they've just read the books, they won't know about. So was that something you were thinking about, like, oh, now I have an opportunity, or what were you doing in this space?
Look, there's never been a problem creating sympathy for the Darkling, right? Like, this is a very beloved character, sometimes to my great frustration. I feel like people give him a pass on things they shouldn't give him a pass on. But I think it's important to remember that his cause is not unjust, much like Magneto's, and that when I was writing Demon in the Wood, the goal wasn't to humanize him. The goal was simply to tell a story about where somebody begins, and whether that's a hero origin story or a villain origin story kind of is up to the reader. And that is what's interesting to me. And Demon in the Wood, I remember my friend Morgan reading it and being like, oh my God, even I love him after this. I was like, whereas my attitude has always been, cool motive, still murder. But I think that, I've said this before, I don't think that the most dangerous people enter our lives just evil. They usually have good qualities and make you feel good until they don't, right? And I think that it's important to say, somebody can have a good cause and also be a dictator. Somebody can have a good cause and also be a tyrant. Somebody can have a good cause and also abuse and exploit the people around him. So that to me was one of the more compelling parts of the story. And I think in the hands of a different actor, he would have just been a cartoon. But I think Ben is a really great actor, and he read everything and read Demon in the Wood and wanted to talk about it and talk about who this person was. He didn't want to just play him as some kind of raving dictator. He wanted to make him human. He's really good and a very nice man.
It is embarrassing for me to admit, I feel like a failure as a fan. I did not know who he was before this show. I know. Maybe he'll get cast as the Doctor, and then he'll enter my universe. But I guess there was a lot of speculation that he would have been a great actor to play. Like, were you thinking of him when they were casting the Darkling?
Somebody fan cast him, I don't even know how long ago. Like, when Eric Heiser was like, his wife, who is a television writer, had written on The Punisher. And so Eric came to me and was like, what do you think of Ben Barnes as the Darkling, as Kerrigan? And I was like, let me show you something. And I went searching for it, and I found the edit that somebody had made of like him, maybe a side bobber with a quote next to it or whatever, in some fabulous coat. And I think my reply had been like, I like that coat and I like that man. And I was like, I think he'll do. I was like, really my response was, if we can get him, please let's get him. But I just didn't know if he'd want to do it. He'd just come off of playing a villain. I didn't know how much he would want to play a villain again. I considered that we were incredibly fortunate to get him, because it's not an easy role to get.
No, I mean, and he has weirdly, like, just sculpturally the right face for it. Like, he's got the big, evil, mesmerizing eyes, but he could be a regular guy, but he's not a regular guy.
I think all that is true. All that is true.
I have one audience question that I'm going to bring in here early because I think it's relevant, which is there any way, without breaking canon, to get Ben Barnes to sing in season 2?
Right. I have this whole, I want to do a spinoff called Darkling After Dark, where he just sits at the piano and just plays the hits.
I would tune in for that.
I
for sure.
truly don't think it's possible unless it was in some crushingly sad scene where he was like singing a Ravkan lullaby to some broken soldier. But I know, right? Allow me to stab you in the heart. But no, he probably will not be singing in this. But he does have an album coming out, and everybody should buy it. Support your local Darkling.
Actually, so this is just me I couldn't understand, and maybe you can explain it to me, because I miss things, and this is why I pay other people to have taste for me, because I'm a book review editor most of the time. But tell me about the choice to not call him the Darkling straight up.
That was a little bit of a fight. I won't lie. Like Eric and I went back and forth on that quite a bit, but it's really hard to sell him as a potential good guy. His name is the Darkling. You know, it's like somebody being called like, you know, Evil McStorm, and then you're like, wait, he's bad. And I think some things work on the page that don't work elsewhere. And we also had a lot, look, you're in Alina's head. So the fact that nobody ever calls him by a name never really comes up. Okay, it's not something that I had to write around. Whereas in this, you have a lot of people, generals, etc., talking about this character. And we also needed to make sure that, you know, look, there's a game that you're playing with audiences who are maybe not that invested in fantasy, and a title like The Darkling is a very fantasy moment. So having him be General Kerrigan instantly locked in. This is the general of an army. This is the role that he plays in this government. This is his relationship to the king, as opposed to having to explain all of that. So there were a lot of good reasons to do it, and I basically put forward a few names that I thought would work, and they really loved Kerrigan, and I was like, that's going to be real confusing to readers based on Count Kerrigan in Rule of Wolves, but we threw in a couple of things about him taking the name of a nobleman, and I think I may have even thrown in a little Easter egg in Rule of Wolves about it, but there's definitely, and also look, names are names, lots of people have them, so.
Okay, now I understand, actually. Like, when you talk about like the mechanics of how he would work in a story that isn't just told from inside Alina's head, now I'm like, okay.
Yeah, the thing for me was not so much the name change, it was sacrificing how personal it is to give up your name to someone. And this is something that's in Demon in the Wood too, right? Your true name is tattooed on your heart. You don't share that with just anybody. So that name has power, and giving up that intimacy was hard for me because it's such a gesture of, I think, actual trust and vulnerability. But I think that other things in the script accomplish that for us.
Which leads me to ask, actually, you know, you talked about fighting with Eric about this. So what fights did you win? Basically, what was so important to you? No, I mean, that sounded rude, but you know what I mean. What was so important to you that you were like, this has to be here?
You know, I am not dodging here, but it is genuinely hard to remember because there was never a time where we were like screaming at each other. Like, most of it was the way that you brainstorm with somebody who you respect and who respects you. So it's hard to sort of look back and see like clear things that were essential. I think that sort of initial thing of saying we cannot have book one of Six of Crows and book one of Shadow and Bone in the same show was sort of the big thing that I was like, I will back you 100%, but you're gonna have to excavate the prequel material here.
I also want to ask, sorry, I'm like looking at my list of questions, so I'm not, it's on the wrong screen. I'm technically well set up here. I do want to kind of ask about, oh, well, actually, no, this is something that I wanted to ask earlier and got distracted. Stop distracting me. In terms of, I think you mentioned earlier, like there were things that the writers had invented that you loved. And I just wanted to dig in there. Like, what was something, you know, like General Kerrigan's ring, like that you went, oh my God, I wish I thought of that.
I have actually thought of two things. One, I'll tell you a thing that they did that I loved. Like, I remember, and again, this is a spoiler for the show, so if you guys didn't see it,
go watch it.
No, yes, go watch it. But they had it originally when David was, in order for them to be able to find Alina, David had invented this tracking device. And I was like, this doesn't work. This breaks the world. Okay, like this, how does this function? What powers this? Like it was wrong for the world, and it was hard for me to convey why it was so wrong. And they were like, but how in the world would he ever find them? And then it was like, okay, there could be threads sewn into this, there could be a ring that he gives, like, then it was, let's move on to other options. But that was like an example of something small where I was like, we have to be very careful about where technology gets introduced and what it is. And then something I loved the writers did, I remember being in the room when Bagra is like, basically like gives the order to kill Mal. And I was like, ah! I was like, yes. I was like, that's so Bagra. I was like, I love Bagra. She is a monster. She's an absolute monster of a human being, but I absolutely love writing her. I thought Zoe's portrayal of her was everything I wanted and more. Like I could just watch an entire show of Bagra smacking people with her stick. Like I just adore her. And I loved that she had in this moment, this ruthlessness, like this is what the stakes are. Yes, I will kill this person who just showed up because he was doing his job. So yeah, I loved it. And I gasped in the room and I was like, yes, good.
Can I just say, speaking of Mal, I like Screen Mal better than I like Page Mal, I have to say. He seems
Archie is
less threatened. Sorry?
Archie is a very good actor, and I was also very aware of the discourse on Mal. Like I don't think, look, I was a young writer and I think I wrote him as a teenage boy. And what I didn't understand was people don't actually want to read about what teenage boys are actually like. And the Mal in the show is a much more idealized Mal. He's somebody who is infinitely loyal and infinitely ferocious, and I think that those are both qualities I wanted to portray, but maybe was not good enough writer to do it.
Well, I disagree, but
you're a good enough writer, but you didn't want to. Like, look, again, I feel like if you look back at your first book and you're like, that's where I peaked, like I just kept my level, you're doing something wrong. Like the whole point is to keep challenging yourself and doing different things and trying to get better at your craft. You read more, you put more work out in the world, and you learn your job, and learning on the job can be embarrassing. Like I imagine there are a lot of actors out there who don't want like their first cameo in Degrassi to be the thing that people remember when if we don't improve, I don't know why one would bother doing this,
Fair enough. I shouldn't be conflating Leigh of today with Leigh of the original Shadow.
Very evolved, Petra. That's what you need to understand.
Well, actually, I mean, we've talked about sort of the ways that you've evolved and how that affected the way the show differs from the book. Is there something that I've missed? Is there something that's really important to you that you want to be like, hey, look, I've changed and this is reflected on the screen?
No. I think, look, the reality is that I can sit here and talk. I'm happy to answer questions. I love talking to people about the show and about the process. I know it can seem incredibly opaque, especially for people who are writers, who want to get into this world and who want to be creating their own work and hope to be adapted someday. And I try to be as candid as I can, within the parameters of what I am allowed and not allowed to say. But at the same time, the work is the work at the end of the day, death of the author. Like, I am not nearly as interesting as my characters, and they should do the talking for me,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. As you were talking, it just popped into my head sort of what you were saying about like nobody wants to read a real teenage boy, and I read a lot of YA and a lot of romance for my job, and also because I love it, and I get to do it for my job. But I think about that, the way that adult literary fiction often shows us people as they are. It's ambiguous. People are crummy. They're they don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to communicate. But if you look at YA and romance, they're creating characters that model the behavior that we would like to see from the men in our lives. So I feel like we've got romance novel Mal.
But also for ourselves, right? Like in YA, nobody says, fuck this, I'm going home and taking a nap. They say, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to fight in the revolution, or I'm going to depose the evil leader, or I'm going to go to prom and do the thing, We are our best selves in young adult. and our worst selves too. We're allowed to have those extremes, and I think that that is super appealing about YA as a genre or a category.
Absolutely. We got, my God, it's like 7:55 already. The hour has flown. I do want to get to audience questions soon, but I also want to ask sort of, there's going to be a second season. Yes, we can confirm that. So this is the first season was your first time sort of working on a TV adaptation. What kind of stuff are you going to, and you're also working on an adaptation of Ninth House, right? Are you writing that?
Yes, I am actually co-writing that. I co-wrote the pilot with a showrunner whose name I don't think I can share because we haven't announced it. But yeah, we'll wait and see if we get a chance to make the show. But that was a pretty wonderful process, and I felt like I was learning on the job, but it was very pleasurable. And also it sort of helped to keep me engaged with the second book because I had to really be predicting things that were going to happen later.
Oh, that's so interesting. Like the idea of writing the second book in a series when you know the first one's going to be on TV.
I mean, you don't know because anything can happen in Hollywood, right?
Right, sure.
But I will say with the Grishaverse, there were like 7, 8 books. I don't know how many books were already out. So I didn't have to I was like, I'm gonna finish this series. Rule of Wolves is gonna come out, but like it's gonna be done. Ta ha ha. Whereas Night House, I'm like, I have to write and I haven't. I've been so slow. But like the prospect of getting that book out, the second book out before we would ever air is very appealing to me because I cannot imagine trying to write with so many voices in my head. I would find that incredibly difficult. And I have a lot more sympathy for George R.R. Martin than I ever had as a reader. So George, solidarity.
I'm thinking of that Paul and Storm song, Write Faster, George R.R. Martin. You all should go look that up on you.
Working away and then being like, oh no, they're talking about me. I don't know why George R. R. Martin speaks this way in my head, but like that would be so traumatizing. It's bad enough when readers are like, when, and you're like, I'm trying, I know I'm the worst. Like
the worst part is that song is like 5 or 6 years old at this point. I had actually a serious question that I was gonna end on, which was, now that you're sort of used to the process of working on a TV show, like what are you carrying forward into season 2 of Shadow and Bone? What have you learned that's going to help you or be useful as you're working on future projects?
I mean, I think I don't know if this is what people are going to want to hear, but I'm learning to let go a little more. There are a lot of crises that happen in the making of the TV show. There are a lot of things that come up, frustrations, difficulties that you don't anticipate, and they can feel like the end of the world. And I think I was so deep in it, it became very hard for me to write. It became very hard for me to think about anything but the show. And the truth is, I do love adaptation. I am honored and delighted that my works are on the screen and that there may be more on the screen. But the job I always wanted was to be a novelist, and that's what I want to keep doing. And in order to keep doing that, I need to step back a little more, and that means letting go.
I think that's a perfectly valid answer. And if people don't want to hear it, well, I'm not going to say anything rude. We have 1,000 people in the audience. But no, I mean, yeah, it's the idea of having to let go and step back because these things are now in other people's hands. It's part of the process. We have 300 questions.
We can get through all of them.
So yeah, so we're gonna go to some of those. Wow.
I guess the one that was in the Darling. Who would win in a fight, Darlington or the Darkling?
Go ahead, please. Well, I look for
book 1, Darlington would lose, but book 2, Darlington, I don't know, would at least be able to put up a fight.
I actually, and this is my question too, like I know you've called King of Scars your farewell to the Grishaverse. Does that mean there's not going to be another Prose book?
I don't know. When I started Rule of Wolves, I had every intention of writing a third Six of Crows book. But right now I don't want to. Like, I left the door wide open at the end of Rule of Wolves, but I also feel like I gave a fitting ending. There's a good possibility that in a year I will feel very different, but I'm not interested in writing a book just for the payday, or just because, I need to feel compelled to tell the story. And I think to honor the characters and the world, then, that's the headspace that I have to be in. And right now I'm not in that headspace. There's other places I want to explore. And again, to be totally honest, things have gotten so loud, like both in terms of the positive and the negative. It's why I left social media. I'll come back. I'll talk about things. I miss it. I miss hearing what my friends are doing. I miss communicating with readers so much, but it got real loud and sometimes really ugly. And it's very hard to create from that feeling. So for right now, let's call it's goodbye for now.
I am wow, there are so many questions. I'm not going to ask you why. No, that's a spoiler. Never mind. So here's something. Without being too spoilery, what are you most excited to see come to the screen in season 2? I already asked you about Stormhunt and you wouldn't tell me. So what can you tell me?
I cannot talk about it, but all I'll say is you all know the new characters, the characters from the books who are coming, and that's what I can't wait to see. That's, this is, look, when you get to see amazing actors play your characters, you get greedy. Then you're like, I want all of them. I want it all. I want to see everything. Like, I really want that very badly because I enjoyed it so much the first time around. And I bet money I know what that question was. It was why I killed a certain character in Crooked Kingdom, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I can. Because it should hurt on the way out. That's how you know you were there. Like, that's, this is war. Like, this is what happens. And I think that there are deep consequences for choices we make and choices that get made for us. So that's all I'll say about that.
I mean,
I get asked that at every single
you knew who it was without even me saying. Well, to go.
I was at a restaurant and the waiter slipped me a note that said that.
Oh no.
I love you, but why did you kill? And I was like,
person.
Oh, why did you spit in my food?
I mean, to go back to George R. R. Martin, the thing that he always says is, yeah, this is when people ask him why he killed off Ned Stark. This is war. People die. So, so here's an interesting question. So we've been talking about combining the Crows with the events of Shadow and Bone, and this person, Allison Buse, is asking, how did these characters meeting alter their motivations? For example, will the fact that Inej has now met a real-life saint affect her choices and beliefs going forward in the show? And have you talked about that in the writer's room?
Yes. This is sort of one of the challenges in moving into some of the content that you guys will be familiar with from the books. And it is something that is absolutely going to shape them. I don't think it would be comfortable to write the characters or make any sense to write the characters if those things did not impact their future choices. So all of these characters are, Alina is changed by her interactions with the Crows, right? And Inej is absolutely changed. And that also changes her dynamic with Kaz. Like, it's invariable. So, and Jesper has been around more Grisha now and has seen the Ravkan army in action. So there's all of those things have to play out in the show. But again, I think that we keep to the spirit of the character, even though some of the particulars will change.
This is a question that we kind of talked about the Darkling and his name, but a lot of people want to know how you actually feel about the fact that they've revealed the Darkling's name so early. There's somebody saying, Leigh, you must talk about this. It is for science.
Like I said, to me, it felt like a loss, right? Like, there's something very beautiful about, about being the one person who is given access to the other. So this is something that is, I guess, one of my romantic jams, right? Like, I love burning, pining, yearning. Like, I just want everyone to be in pain for as long as possible. And, being the one person who gets to see a particular side of someone is so thrilling, right? It's true in real life too, when you realize you're the one they picked, like, to reveal the true self to. Like, when you can be your true self with someone, it's such a magical, truly magical thing. So to me, that was a loss, but I understood why we had to make those sacrifices. And I did feel like there were elements of the character and their interactions that still allowed for us to see both the tender side of him and the deeply manipulative side of him, which are sometimes one and the same.
Oh, this is a fun one. So, did you get to keep anything from the set?
Oh yes. So the
book, right there. Can we see it?
Maybe you can see it. Okay. So I don't want to like pick up the laptop and walk around because I'm wearing shorts. But it's really warm in here. So there's a scene. It's one of my favorite scenes where Jesper opens the door on the coach and David throws a book at him, and it's the Robkin edition of Shadow and Bone. And I was like, please, can I have it? So they gave it to me, and I treasure it so much. I love it so much. It's so beautiful. And it's Robkin. Like, I don't think it's an actual translation, but the pages are all in Robkin script. And I got to keep like some cards and chips and just little knickknacks and coins from Ketterdam and the Crow Club, which are very special. And my nephew Ryan is a magician and an amateur magician, and so I brought back some cards for him. So yeah.
Oh. Did you get to keep the purple kefta?
I did. It's hanging in my closet, but it doesn't fit me because I ate too much during COVID. But I don't care.
The COVID-19 is real. I suffered from that too.
Give me all the carbs. It is truly the most beautiful garment I have ever. I need to explain to you guys that Wendy Partridge, our costume designer, I can't explain how detailed all of these costumes are, and it is lined with fake fur. It is beaded and embroidered and just exquisite. It's so stunning. Don't play the cameo clip. I've seen a little note come up. Like, let's not. I wanted to answer more questions. Let's answer more questions.
Okay. Well, actually, I have a question. It's purple, which is fabricator, right?
Yeah.
Because you need world.
I wanted to be a corporalnik, but originally I was going to be in a scene. Alina is wearing the healer's kefta early on, and so I was just going to be in a scene where I opened a door to let her into the little palace for the first time. They were like, "We don't want you both in red." So I was like, "Okay, purple. I would gladly be a fabricator." So that's what ended up happening, even though we ended up shooting me in a different scene.
Here's a fun question. Are you taking applications to pick up cat and or goat poop on the set?
That is very kind of you. I will tell you that I just ordered Freddie, my dog, a goat snood. So he's going to be Milo for Halloween.
That's adorable. Are there going to be more goats?
I don't know that Milo will be making a comeback, but we are all aware that he is the biggest star in the show. So there are Saint Milo references, and if I ever do another Lives of Saints, there will be a goat saint.
I'm excited. We have like a lot of questions about the crows, honestly. Here's one that I'm kind of interested in, which is as the show goes along, are you going to try to intertwine any of Kaz's backstory? Because boy, does he have one.
Yes. I can't say very much, but you're going to be seeing all of the crows' backstories one way or another. At least if we get the episodes, if we get the seasons, those are all integral parts of the story. And I think that they may come out, and like if you notice in the book, they come out in bits and pieces, and then you can string them all together. But yes, you will.
This is the most popular question currently, which is, what was your favorite episode of the show? Can you say, is it like kids? Are you not supposed to have a favorite?
No, my favorite episode was 7. I can tell you it was the second to last episode, and I remember watching that without any special effects. It had just placeholders, right? Because that's like the last thing, not the very last thing they do, but it's one of the last things they do. So I was just like watching like placeholder animation and like a tennis ball on a stick, and all this stuff. But that scene with Alina and the stag got to me. Like, I remember just crying when I watched that episode, and I think it was when it really sank in for me that this was happening, that this was real. And I have a very clear memory of writing that scene. I remember writing the last line of that scene, which was the woods were silent in their grief. And that was the first line that I had written in the whole damn manuscript when I thought, oh, maybe this book will be good. Like, I had, my only goal writing that novel was to finish a damn book because I wanted to be a writer so badly, and I had never managed that. So the whole time I was telling myself, it's crap, it's crap, it's crap, don't worry, it's crap, it's fine, just get through it. And I remember writing that scene and thinking, oh wait, I actually love this story and I love these characters, and I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna make this better. So seeing that come to life was pretty powerful. And I also think it's a great episode. I just love it.
It's a gorgeous scene. Oh, damn, here's a question that I wish I'd seen earlier because it kind of follows on to what we were talking about with sort of the changes to the crows. How do you think changing the ending of the TV show, where Alina helps the entire skiff rather than just leaving it behind with Mal, how's that going to change her arc later on?
A lot of people still died because of her. And also, I think I think that there's still plenty of guilt and trauma to go around, I guess is what I would say. And also, I think one of the changes the show made that I was really nervous about, but that I think worked very well, was making the amplifiers part of the body. And seeing that collar sink into her neck and her reaction, because Jessie is so fucking good, the horror in her, the sense of violation in her, and then her ability to take that power back was so vital. But I think both of those things, what she was forced to do on the Fold, how many people died on the Fold, how many people died in Nova Kirbys, and what that collar means, and it being a part of her body, are all just so deep that I think that it's going to maybe give her a slightly different trajectory, but I think a very powerful one.
Following on from that, actually, somebody's asking, and I know you've said that the story is going to diverge from the books in future seasons. Do you, guys, this is spoiler too, but I'm going to ask it anyways, and you can tell me to get lost. Do you want the shows and the books to end in the same place, the same way?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Look, I wrote the books the way I wrote them for a reason, and that I haven't seen any signs that is going to change at all. But there are certain things that I know if we get to move forward will change, because we'll want to see these characters continue in their adventures. And also because there's a finality to some things that happen in the books that then is sort of undone in later books. I'm really being abstruse here, but I guess my point is there are certain things that are essential to me that stay the same, and certain things that I don't care about, and you learn sort of which things. And fortunately, I've been on the same page with the writers from moment one. There's never been a time where we've been like, when they've been like, well, what we really want is for Alina to become a beautiful Pegasus at the end. So, there's never been although amazing twist. So there hasn't really been a conflict like that, but I do see the shape of the second season as being somewhat different from the books. And again, I can't say more, but it will make sense what they're doing when you all see it.
I think, God, we're almost at the end. We have time for one more question. Can you see the questions? Is there one you particularly want to answer?
No, I didn't. I closed the window.
All right. Well, so here's a good one to end on. Do you ship Genialina or Zoyalina more?
Everybody. Wow. I love enemies to lovers, so I would go Zoyalina.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that's about where I do.
I
Oh,
love enemies to lovers. I mean, who doesn't? It's so fun.
well, I think that's a great note to end on. Leigh Bardugo, thank you so much. This has been a hoot.
It was really fun. Thank you, everybody who was here. I'm sorry I didn't get to all your questions. You can always send me a question at my newsletter at lastly@gmail, and I answer a lot of questions every month in my newsletter. And hopefully someday we'll be allowed to tour and do real events again, and I'll get to meet some of you in person.
I would just like to say, hang on for just 1 second, because the executive director of Penn Faulkner is going to come on with some closing remarks. So I am just going to say thank you to everyone who came and asked such thoughtful questions. Thank you, Leigh, for creating this amazing world and being super fun to talk to. And I'm Petra Mayer with NPR Books. Thank you all, and good night. And here is the executive director of Penn Faulkner.
Hello, everyone. I am Gwydion Sullivan. It's lovely to have you here tonight. Let me start by offering my really tremendous thanks for Leigh and Petra and Shahenda, and also to all of you for making this another incredible literary conversation. That was, I can't believe how many great questions there were. We couldn't do this without you, and so we are so grateful that you are here. We have our donation info. We're going to drop that in the chat. I wanted to close tonight by mentioning that Penn Faulkner works really hard to create meaningful encounters with writers and with writing and books, just like the one we've had here tonight, for students in grades 3 to 12 who attend underserved Title I schools in DC. Literature helps them helps those students stay connected to a larger world, just like it does for all of us. And books help us all bear up under difficult circumstances. So if you can, help us, even $5 from you can help us totally transform one young person's reading life. And $5 a month, if you can manage that, helps us do the same thing over and over and over again throughout the year. Penn Faulkner has continued to stay really strong and stay really hopeful and positive throughout the crisis of this pandemic that we're living through. And part of what's given us hope is the support that you have given us. So thank you so much in advance for anything you can do. And thank you for joining us tonight, too. Have a great night.